Now, Neil Clark is a journalist who's written extensively about Syria, and he joins me live from Oxford. Neil, we've just been hearing from our correspondent about the difficulties of getting information confirmed on the ground. Obama has said government use of chemical weapons would be a red line. What if a chemical weapon were carried out by the rebels? Do you think this is a possibility? Do you think that they did?
Well, if chemical weapons have been used, it's very unlikely that it would be the Syrian government that's used them, because the Syrian government knows that the US, France and Britain are just waiting to strike them. So the very last thing they would want to do would be to provoke that sort of intervention. So it would be lunacy and madness for President Assad's forces to use chemical weapons. And so if, we find that chemical weapons has been used, it has to be by the rebels. And if that's the case, then obviously I think that will highlight the hypocrisy of the US and the West, because they've said that it'd be a red line if chemical weapons are used. That only seems to apply if President Assad's forces use them, the Syrian army. And so we've got to be consistent on this. Chemical weapons, to use them, it's wrong. And if the rebels are using them, they should be indicted for war crimes.
Now, the new opposition prime minister, I guess a naturalized US citizen, what do you think drove this election, his election?
Well, it reminds me of the election, in inverted commas, of Mahmoud Jibril in Libya. If you think back 2 years to the Libyan NTC, a very similar scenario. Mr. Jibril, like Mr. Hito, he had spent many decades in the US. He'd studied in the US. And there was a very revealing WikiLeaks cable from the US ambassador to Libya, which said that he was our kind of man. He was the sort of person who could follow the US line, so to speak. And I think it's exactly the same scenario with this man today, Mr. Hito, because he spent decades living in Texas. He's from the US, he's got a passport. And, of course, the Americans want to make sure that if and when President Assad falls, they've got their man in Damascus and they've cherry-picked him. He's been voted by 35 people. And it's quite ludicrous to argue that this guy has the right to rule Syria, whereas President Assad, whether we support him or not, does have sizable support within the country, which is why he's still in power. And so I think, the answer to your question, the US wants this man as an ideal sort of leader, post-Assad, to take power and obviously to do the things expected of him, which would be to open up the Syrian economy to US multinationals, to privatize the economy, and of course to break with Hezbollah and to break with Iran.
Now, we keep saying rebels, but really they're a mix of moderates to al-Qaeda-linked extremists. Again, can Hito keep them together?
No, it's a simple answer to that, because, as we said, what we call the rebels are a very wide-ranging group of people, from radical Islamists, al-Qaeda groups, to moderate Islamists, to people who are very, very anti-American, to people who are very pro-American. And he's got an impossible task here. And the biggest problem he's got is, of course, that the so-called rebels don't have majority support within Syria. They don't. This is why this conflict is still going on, because if President Assad was unpopular, as the US would like us to believe and Britain would like us to believe, then President Assad would have gone by now. The fact is that he does have sizable support in the country. People in Syria look at the rebels and say, no thanks, we don't want these people. They're very divided. We don't know what we're going to get. We're going to get radical Islam. We're going to get who knows what we're going to get if they take power. So they're rallying behind the government. So I think he's got an impossible task.
Neil Clark, always interesting to hear your thoughts on this subject. Thank you very much for joining us here live.
Thanks,